Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another brand new episode of MuslimFin. We have an exciting episode for you this evening. Tonight we are talking to the co-founder of the Muslim Family Law Hub, Fatima Essop. And here to introduce Fatima is our good friend Siraj Buzik.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, Ali, we got a very exciting guest with us tonight. Fatima Essop is a founding member of the Muslim Family Law Hub. She has practiced as both an attorney and advocate of the High Court of South Africa, as well as a family law mediator. She has a degree in Islamic law from the International Peace College of South Africa, a certification in Islamic finance from Ethica Institute of Islamic Finance, UAE, and a PhD in law from the University of Cape Town. She was a fellow at Harvard Law School in the program on law and society in the Muslim world in 2022-2023. She researches and publishes in the area of Muslim family law and advocates for more just and equitable readings of Islamic law texts pertaining to Muslim family laws. She firmly believes in using law as an instrument of social justice. Fatima, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Siraj.
Fatima, can you tell us more about yourself and what inspired you to create the Muslim Family Law Hub?
Okay, shukran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. First of all, thank you to both of you for having me on this evening. The Muslim Family Law Hub is a long time in the making. So I qualified with my law degree in South African law many years ago. I think it was in 1994. And then I did articles. And at that stage, I did articles at the Legal Resources Center, where they had they were doing test cases on Muslim family law. And I then joined the Women's Legal Center, where we also started a Muslim personal law project, because we had so many women coming to us for legal advice, because at that time Muslim marriages were not yet recognized as valid in South African law. And over the years, I've had to give women advice who are going through Islamic divorces, etc. And so about 12 years ago, I decided to do a degree myself in Islamic law, and that's when I registered for a BA degree and went to sit in a classroom again at IPSA to do a degree in Islamic studies, which included Islamic law and Arabic. And then subsequent to graduating, I decided to do a PhD in Islamic law of inheritance and South African law of inheritance. And that is basically my background. And then after completing my PhD, I got a fellowship at Harvard Law School in the program on law and society in the Muslim world. And there we specifically focused on Muslim family law. So it was myself from South Africa, somebody from Egypt, Marwa, somebody from Sri Lanka, and all of us, all our research and our work focused on the application of Muslim family law in our different countries. And that is basically the background to my interest in Muslim family law.
Okay, that's amazing. So how do you see the Muslim Family Law Hub website helping the South African community?
Okay, so before actually getting to the website is only hopefully going to be one of our resources. Mm-hmm. The idea behind the Muslim Family Law Hub actually originated when I was at Harvard, because what I thought about is that Muslims in a minority context, like we're only 2% of the South African population. And so Islamic law the Shariah is not implemented in South Africa. It's the South African law that applies. But we as Muslims have been here for over 300 years, and we want to apply our Muslim family laws in the private sphere. We want our marriages, divorces, and inheritance to be in terms of Islamic law. And so we have to learn to navigate both systems, the Islamic law system within the South African law system. And what I realize is that a lot of people don't know what their rights and responsibilities are under both systems. And that's where I thought maybe I should have a resource where people can access knowledge about both systems in one place. And that's the idea that's where the idea originated about, like, let's have a website where people can access in a very accessible manner. And my director then suggested that we create a NPO to house the website. And that is and when I got back last year, we started the process of registering the NPO, getting board members. And one of our resources is the website, which we hope will assist people in navigating the space Islamic law and South African law within the family law context. So the idea is to basically make knowledge as accessible as possible to people. And if you look at the website, I mean, that's for the past, it's only a week and a half, that's the main feedback we've been getting from people is they find it easy to navigate. So, yeah.
And congratulations on the launch. So
Thank you.
last week, that's amazing. Also, in terms of, because you mentioned inheritance,
Yes.
and that's something that we at MuslimFin also think is quite important, and definitely a topic that our viewers are very interested in.
Yeah.
Just around the inheritance piece, what are some of the gaps that you see within that context of, trying to blend the Sharia law within the South African context?
Okay, so firstly, with family law, and especially in Muslim family law, you can't really separate it, right? So inheritance, which is mirath, is obviously a subject on its own, and it's a very complex subject in Islamic law. But I always say that you have to understand marriage and divorce in order to also understand inheritance, because they're all related, right? So if you're married, your inheritance shares are based on a wife would get a quarter if there's no descendants, if the husband dies and has no descendants, or an eighth. So it's related in terms of marriage, and of course, if you divorce, if you've been issued one talaq, it's irrevocable. You can still inherit from your husband, as opposed to if he gave you a triple divorce, or if it's an irrevocable divorce, then you can't inherit. So you can understand they all are related. I think one of the main issues is that people are under the impression that a lot of people still don't write up wills, which is really strange. It's 2024 to think that people are still not doing wills. And this month, I think, is Wills Month. There are so many lawyers and different institutions which actually provide a free service for you to draw up a valid will. Because if you don't have a will, what people don't understand is that the Islamic law of inheritance won't apply to your estate automatically. What will happen is the South African law of interstate succession will apply to the distribution of your estate. And interstate succession basically means you didn't have a will, and so now the state will determine how the shares are distributed in your estate. So I think that's the first thing, is that people must draw up wills, and especially if they want their estate to be distributed according to Islamic inheritance law.
Fatima, as important as wills are and inheritance and the way it's distributed, why do you think so many or few people actually draft a will, put a will in place? And what are the challenges, and what is holding the community back of actually taking up a will? Or,
I think there are multiple reasons. I think it's a lack of knowledge, maybe. People are not aware that if they don't do a will, that the estate will be distributed according to the state law. So that's one of the reasons. Very interestingly, because I did empirical research in this area, some Muslim people choose not to have a will because in the South African interstate laws, your wife will get more, or a spouse gets more than they would in terms of Islamic Sharia, especially a wife. Okay. Similarly, in South African interstate laws, your daughter will get the same share like your son. There's no differentiation. Whereas in Islamic law, of course, a daughter gets half the share of the son. So like I say, some people don't do it because they don't have the knowledge of it. Some people feel that they don't have the money to go to a lawyer, but that's also not necessarily a good enough reason, because there are institutions who will do it for you for a nominal fee. And then some people choose not to do it because they prefer just having their estate disputed according to South African interstate laws.
It's very interesting that you mention, the family dynamic. In let's say financial planning, for example, which is where you would assist your clients. Is there a way for parents who have, let's say one son and two daughters, for example, to then structure the estate in a certain way that they are able to distribute certain things almost evenly between the kids?
Okay, so first of all, Ali, I must set the record straight, because this is what people have asked. The Muslim Family Law Hub is not an organization that's going to be giving legal advice to the public, right? Okay. We are a non-profit organization, and at the moment, our primary resource is the website, which has free access to information on all these various systems of laws, right? The Islamic law, South African law, checklist, and your resource, which we can go back to. So we're not there to give legal advice. Okay. We're not there to litigate because, quite frankly, we don't have the resources to do that. We are non-profit. Maybe in a few years' time, when we have lots of funders and donors, we can eventually employ lawyers to litigate for us, but at this stage, that's not what we do. With respect, I'm going to answer that question
Sure.
in any event, is that the best way to do that is in your lifetime, you can donate or you can give your sons and your daughters whatever you want, and that would include giving them equal shares in your property or your business in your lifetime. If you have a business, make sure that they both have equal shareholding in your business, because once you die, then of course the Islamic Shariah kicks in, and then the daughter will automatically get half of what the son. The only way you can do that, and even that there's differences of opinion, is you have 1/3 of your estate which you can bequeath, which you have freedom of testation over, right? So 1/3 of your estate you can give to other than heirs. So there's those who say that the 1/3 can't be given to heirs, right? So you can't necessarily give that 1/3 to your daughters, but there's those who say you can, scholars who say you can, on condition that the other heirs all agree to it, right? But that would be once you've died, then the brothers will have to agree that yes, the bequests can go to their sisters to equalize the shares. And in reality, that seldom happens, because when the death of the testator happens, sometimes you see the worst side of people, and brothers might not be, or other heirs might not be keen to have one of the other heirs be entitled to a bequest.
I can just imagine. I can see so many questions coming through for you to answer now. With you dealing with this question. And I'm sure we're going to pass that on to you. But I know that you're saying that you don't have the resources at this moment.
Yes.
So how do we get other organizations maybe who want to contribute or provide the resources involved with the Muslim Family Law Hub?
Yeah, so that's the idea. If you look at the website has 4 main components. It's the Islamic law. It will tell you what the Islamic law is on marriage, divorce and inheritance, or Babul Nikah, Babul Talaq and Babul Mirath. Then it will tell you what the South African law is under South African law of marriage. Should you get married in community? Should you have an antenuptial contract, etc.? Then it also tells you under divorce and inheritance what your rights are under South African law, which is 2 different systems. It then also provides you a checklist for each of the doors, right? If you're going to get married, these are the things you need to make sure you tick off. If you're going to have a divorce, these are the things you should consider. And then lastly, it has a resource tab. And that is where we still need to populate the resource tab, because that is where service providers can reach out to us and say, we'd like to be one of your resources, right? So as I indicated to you earlier, for instance, when a woman goes through a divorce, we've identified there are 3 areas she usually needs help. She needs legal assistance to get out of the marriage. She needs financial assistance, because inevitably a woman is left on the back foot financially on divorce. And then she needs emotional, psychological support, right? And so, for instance, yesterday I met with an amazing organization called the Counseling Hub in Woodstock. They, for instance, provide counseling to anybody who's going through whatever trauma at 50 Rand a session.
Wow.
All right? That is very, very reasonable, and they provide you for about counseling for about 6 weeks. And so that is the kind of resource we'd put on under our resources. Similarly, if there are attorneys who deal with divorces, we'd put their details on the hub. At the moment, we only have the ulama councils who deal with fasakh applications or who facilitate talaqs. But that's where we would have various service providers within the community have their details under the resource tabs, under each one, whether it be somebody who does wills and estates, tax planning, that would be under the inheritance resource tab. So we are at the point where we now have to obviously secure various service providers to put the details under our resource tab. So it's essentially a one-stop shop. Yeah. You'll go there and you'll see what does the And initially what happened was when we did the website, I provided them with all these like thesis articles to load up onto the different babs. And the web designer said, absolutely not. I can't even get through the first few paragraphs. You need to make this into bite-size pieces so that people can actually navigate it easily. And then we decided, okay, let's do a Q&A. And that's why you see the format is Q&A. And even then, they were very helpful in developing personas for each door. And so that the questions were based on those personas. And so that is how we developed the actual content for each of the doors.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I think those are some of the challenges we as MuslimFin had when we launched our website. But speaking about the website, how does the Muslim Family Law Hub ensure that the content on the website remains accurate and relevant both to the Islamic principles as well as the evolving legal landscape in South Africa?
Yeah, so that's obviously a challenge as well. That is something we need to keep it updated. But for me, so initially, as I indicated to you, I gave them like really bulky documents with. So in Islamic law, if you say something, you have to have a dalil, you have to have a proof. And I'd have the statement, the document that I gave them had all the hadith and the proofs from the Quran, but I couldn't put any of that in the website, right? Because it's a Q&A and people don't necessarily want to be bogged down and overwhelmed by all of that. So now, for instance, my next step would be to put a link or a hyperlink so that if people question, on what basis do you say A, B, or C? And then let's say the one question is, do I always need my guardians as a woman? Do I need my guardian's consent to marry? Then I say, well, in the three madhab you do, but in the Hanafi, you don't need your father's consent. But I don't have a proof for that. So ideally what I should do in the next phase is actually have links to where exactly in the Sunnah or the Hadith or in the classical literature does it say that. So that's in terms of the Islamic law. And then the South African law, of course, we have to keep that updated as well, and that could include cases as the law evolves. We'd have to include that and update it on the website as well.
Fatima, I'm sure you've seen so many things, obviously, now in your career as a lawyer.
Yes.
Who do you specifically want to go to your website, though? I know it's broadly speaking, there's a lot of people that you can assist, or mostly the community. But what's the focus? Who's the focus? Who are you really aiming to help? Who do you think is going to benefit the most from this website or the other resources that you guys have available?
Okay, so firstly,
maybe you could give us a couple of examples of.
Okay. So before actually giving you the example, when we developed each door, the web designers encouraged us to create a persona, and that's exactly what we did. So the persona for Babel Nikah is a 25-year-old woman. She's now finished university. She's on the verge of entering into the workplace, earning her own money, but she's also wanting to get married. So what are the kind of questions she's going to ask us? And those are the kind of questions we assumed she would ask us under the Babel Nikah, right? So both in Islamic law and South African law. In the divorce law, we have the persona is a 35-year-old woman. She's now been married for about 10 years. She's got 2 minor children. She's worked. They've got a joint house, but now she wants out of the marriage. And she wants to know what are her rights under Islamic law. Her husband doesn't want to give her talaq. Very common, the husband doesn't want to give the talaq. Why? He doesn't want to be seen to be the one who's to blame. And so she has to apply for a fasakh, right? So how does she get the fasakh? How does she secure rights in the home for herself? So that is the persona for the divorce door. The persona for the inheritance door is a 55-year-old man. Like I chatted to my brother the other day and he was saying, I looked up your website, I'm not interested in marriage and divorce, I'm only looking at the inheritance door. So I said, you're exactly the person we were looking at, because the persona for the inheritance door is a 55-year-old man. He is now facing his mortality. He wants to make sure that he makes right with
Still
all
young
his
at 55.
but obviously that's when they start thinking of it, that age, you think Hajj, dying, whatever. And then you think, okay, but I want it to be Islamic law, but I want to make sure that it's going to be upheld in South African law. So that's the persona for that. Because those are the kind of people you generally encounter who come to you for advice. It's that young couple who wants to know, what must we do? We want to get married. What are the kind of things that we should do to secure our future marriage? Divorce is just so many cases. I don't know, at the launch. So I explain.
Maybe talk about the marriage one.
The marriage one, which was
around the marriage one.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are looking for that or looking to get married and need some advice on, because it's a scary thing,
Yes, it's very overwhelming.
It's a life-changing event, and you're now spending the rest of your life with someone. So what are some of the main things in terms of those questions and the checklist that someone who's getting married must think about?
So that's a very important thing, is that one of the main, what's very encouraging is a lot of couples go to marriage classes. But the couples I chatted to, especially in preparation for the launch, because there was a couple, very interestingly, who came to tell their story and how they decided not to get married by civil law. And because it was just too much information and they didn't know where to go to process it all. So they only got married by nikah. And what they raised with me, and this is something that my son, who's recently married, also raised with me, is when you go into marriage classes, they don't necessarily speak about because everyone's so in love and they're engaged, nobody's really comfortable speaking about what's going to happen if there's a divorce, right? And I think that's actually a super important discussion to have. Even if you're so madly in love with each other, you need to be able to sit back and have a very almost cold-hearted kind of conversation on what are the kind of issues that how will we deal with it if we ever get to the point. Because now you're calm and you're collected and you can make decisions about how you're going to divide things and what are we going to do and how we're going to deal with it. Because I promise you, when you get to that point and you're now at that point of divorce, things are so acrimonious that you just can't even sit around a table and agree on things.
And it's probably better to talk about it before you get married.
That's
and
right.
then by the when you are in the marriage, you're like, I don't want to get to that point. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And that might spur you on to make things work.
So one of the things I think we need to address is how do we... So I asked this, and very interestingly, so my son got married and I insisted he must go through the process of an anti-nuptial contract. And now only tells me, Mommy, we found that super awkward because we had to talk about divorce when we were madly in love. And it was just such a super uncomfortable conversation to have. But I think it's an important conversation to have, and maybe not the two alone. Maybe you should have it in a group session. Part of the marriage classes can have quite a substantial part dealing with if you are going to separate, because it happens, right? There are people who just can't get along, but the Quran says if you want to separate, then do so in kindness. So teaching them the etiquette of what happens when you are, and that no matter what happens between the two of you, you have to be fair and just to each other. And you have to treat each other with kindness and part with kindness and treat each other justly. And that, unfortunately, is where it just doesn't happen in our community. I mean, I spoke to a few imams today, and they were telling us since 2020, it's gone worse. The divorce rate is so high in our Muslim community. It's high in South Africa. People are not reaching the 10-year mark of their marriages, but the Muslims are no different. And you would think that it's only young people, but it's not. It's a cross from young people to middle age to old people who are separating. And it's, I don't know what necessarily the causes are, but
I was ask that question.
I spoke to some of some counselors who deal with this, and there are various reasons. Some were saying, you know what is very interesting is that, so one of the main reasons women will apply for a fasakh is because the husband doesn't nafaka them. Right, so that's one of the main reasons men are not supporting their wives.
And can you just say that maybe in English for the...
Sorry. So
people that
in Islamic law, the husband is responsible for maintaining his wife and his children, right? And that means he must make sure she has housing, clothes, food, she and the children, right? But unfortunately, a lot of the time, men are not fulfilling their responsibility in that regard. It's women who are, even though they're married, they're upholding all the, paying the bond, buying the groceries, doing everything that the husband is supposed to do. That is one of the main reasons in the research that I did, that women are leaving, applying for FASA. One of the other main reasons is, and you'll be very surprised by this, drug abuse is very high in our community. Drug abuse is very high in our community. And then one of the counselors was telling me I think she thinks that social media also has a large part to play with it in the younger generation, because people see certain things on social media and then the reality doesn't meet up to that when they eventually married, and then it's just like a complete letdown. And so the staying power is less in the marriage. But I think there's just multiple reasons why marriages are just not even reaching the 7-year or the 10-year mark. It's actually quite sad.
And then obviously, of course, on the other side, if people follow the advice and go to the marriage classes, then there are those marriages that are going for 50, 60 years,
Yes, alhamdulillah, there are those, and those are really like, we need to look up to those and find out what are they doing right.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's quite interesting, because I spoke to these imams today who were telling me, and asked them, what do you think the reason is? Is it, like the website is one of our resources, and it's about disseminating knowledge in an accessible manner. But sometimes I think that's not that's obviously not enough. There are limits to what the law can do, right? I think that there's just a lack of kind of respect, and the way people interact with each other, engage with each other. I don't know, that's lacking. So you can know all your rights and responsibilities, but if your interaction and the way you deal with people is lacking, then none of that knowledge is going to make any difference. And so for me, I've always told my children, you need to find somebody who's kind and generous, and be careful about what you look for in a spouse, because it's those qualities that a kind person is never going to lift his hand to you. A generous person is never going to be tight-fisted in giving you what you need in your home, right? So those are the kind of issues that, divorce is a big one in our community.
Yeah.
And very sadly, most of the time, I'm not saying that's always, but a lot of the time, it's women who are at the short end of the stick. Women are left the most vulnerable.
And I can see, Siraj, this is something that we can continue with and probably speak on this for the rest of the evening.
But I have a question for Fatima.
Okay.
Fatima, from a South African perspective, where are we in terms of recognizing Islamic marriages?
Yeah.
That's the one part of it. The second part is, would you advise young couples or people looking to get married both, the nikah, Islamic law, as well as by the state as well?
So firstly, the court has said our Muslim marriages are now valid, but we don't have legislation that regulates the consequences of a Muslim marriage, which means that the nafaka and all those kind of, or the consequences of the Islamic divorce, that is not somewhere in a piece of legislation written out, and it's not like that at all. Right, so the court has said, because our government has had no legislation, the court has said this is unconstitutional, Muslim marriages are valid. And then in May this year, and a lot of people don't know this or don't even understand it, is President Cyril Ramaphosa passed an act called the Divorce Amendment Act, which basically says that even if you're married by Islamic law only, you can now go to a South African court and obtain a divorce. Not a talaq, not a fasakh. You'd issue a summons and you'd get a divorce like any other woman who's married in terms of a civil marriage. So this is obviously
Raises another
controversial.
very, because now what does that mean? It means a woman who was married by nikah only, and what the court can do is, because in Muslim marriage is considered automatically out of community of property, which means what mine is mine, is yours is yours.
Yes.
But if you apply now, in terms of the Divorce Amendment Act, to the court for the divorce, that court has a discretion to redistribute the assets. So let's say the husband has the house, the car, everything, and the wife, she told her she must stop working, she must look after the children in the house. The court can say it, but despite the fact that she hasn't made any financial contribution, the court recognizes her non-financial contribution and has a discretion to redistribute his assets and say you have to give her a share in that. A lot of people don't know this because it's recent. So that's the status now of our Muslim marriages and divorce. In terms of advice to couples, yes. I say you must have a marriage contract. Firstly, there's two, and this is what we explain on the website. You have a Muslim marriage contract, which deals with your nikah, your mahar, and then you can decide whether you're going to get married by civil law, and there are different ways, and there's different views on this, but I know that there's some ulama bodies have said in community is not consistent with the Shariah. The reason they say that, and so in community is because all your assets are combined, and so you both own 50-50 of the joint estate. The problem is your liabilities are also. Okay. And so they're saying one person can't be held liable for the liabilities of another. And of course that has its own disadvantages, which we explain on the website. The other alternative is you can get married in terms of an anti-nuptial contract, and that's what I encourage couples to do.
And that's without the accrual, right?
You can do it, according to some of the ulama, you should be doing it out of accrual. But the problem with that is you're back in the same situation like you would have been in Islamic marriage, is that it's now you have completely separate estates, right? Whereas if you have accrual, then at least after your marriage, whatever is acquired during the marriage, and if you divorce, then at least whoever estate has accrued more, that spouse has to share with the other spouse. So, I mean, it's people have to exercise the choice, and that's the thing about in Islam. If you contract and you agree to something, then it should be considered acceptable if you both have agreed that this is the way we want to conduct our marriage. So yes, I would recommend that you get married in terms of civil law as well, because that protects you. That's automatic protection. So, and a lot of people, I mean, young people are not doing that.
Yeah.
They're just getting married by the imam only.
Correct.
And an imam, not all imams are marriage officers.
Okay.
So that is something that young people should definitely consider.
Fatima, shukran very much. We
No
really
problem.
appreciate you coming out.
Shukran.
And how can people get in contact with you and your team?
So there's a form on our website.
And the website
And
is?
people can fill out the form, and we will respond to those emails. At this stage, as I indicated, somebody asked me, "Where's your center?" I said, "No center." we don't have a center at the moment. It's the main resource is the website, and in future we intend having workshops, educational workshops within the community on the content that's occurring on the website, inshallah.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. And the website is www.muslimfamilylawhub.org.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, wonderful. Again, shukran for your time. Appreciate it,
Afwan.
Siraj.
No, that's all. Alhamdulillah.
Okay.
Jazakallah.
Shukran, Ali, and shukran, Shiraj.
Okay,
Thank you.
all the best. Assalamu alaikum.
Islam.